Aphro's dual wields being nerfed, and healers adjusted, and impen's being changed? Well, stay tuned to find out. Hey, it's Dan, and welcome back to Unified Gaming. Now in this video I want to go through and just talk about the PTS and what's happening next week. If you're unaware or just live under a rock, the PTS is basically the public test server, and that's where you can go on, basically play the patch a bit early in its kind of beta stage, so there's a few bugs, few things that will be changed, but it really lets you kind of see what are they implementing, what are they adding, what they're changing, what's being nerfed, being buffed, adjusted, all that good stuff. And well, for a PvP player and a PvP channel, that is absolutely phenomenal because we can really get an advantage, really get a leg up on the competition. Go in, test stuff out, really see what's working, what isn't working, so that way when the patch does drop, you know exactly what to do, exactly what works, and how to be as best as you can in PvP. So we're going to go through and just look at some of the previews, some of the things that are changing, kind of what is the focus of this PTS cycle. And if there is something you really want to see me test, go, oh Dan, could you do a video on the vampire changes or the video on a werewolf and what does that look like nowadays? Or maybe, is Templar still any good in PvP? Then obviously comment below and I'll get straight on that. And do expect a video on Monday where I'm going to go through just like the 50 pages of notes, but I'm going to break it down into just smaller segments, kind of looking at these are the changes for this class, this class, this class, this skill line, this skill line, this skill line. So that way you can just jump in, grab the bit you need and just move on. Anyway, for this video we're going to look at those previews now and kind of what does it actually mean for next patch. So looking at that preview guys, what can we expect from the PTS? Well, it's really good news in my opinion. I know some people are going to go, no, there's nerfs coming, and yes there are some nerfs coming, it's very clear, it's very apparent, but there's some well needed ones in all honesty. But there's also some buffs on the sort of table, some also changes just for the health of PvP, so let's look at all of that stuff now. This first bit basically just says, look, we want to basically say thank you for everybody providing changes and feedback for the light attacks and all that good stuff. This time we're going to focus on item standards, so looking at monster sets mainly, improving quality of life of werewolves, so they're actually going to be somewhat useful now, so it's just not vampires this patch. And they'll also put a specific bit about a few adjustments for PvP. So the idea is that they're going to change a few things with Battle Spirit to make it work more intuitively, shall I say, so that way it kind of makes more sense in PvP, because currently there's a big mismatch between PvE and PvP, and PvE players moan about PvP stuff getting stuff nerfed, and it goes back and forward. So I think this is a really good way of changing it. As I've said, this update is not just about vampires, they're also including werewolves. They want werewolves to now be in your face, so when you're in werewolf kind of mode you should be attacking people, you shouldn't be running away, which I currently see. You don't see many of them as it is because their rotation is very boring, so they're going to add a rotation to it, so you've got a few options, so it's just not light attack, light attack, light attack and maybe raw. They're going to actually have a few options, which is always good. They're also changing a few kind of skills to give them more functionality and kind of just help make the werewolf kit more sort of impactful, more fun to use. So the idea is that Pounce will now have a follow-up attack. It's actually called Carnage. It has been sort of released or leaked a while back, but it's Carnage, and the idea is that when you use it you add a bleed. That's an execute, like poison injection, so it's always a good idea just to have extra damage. Damage is needed in PvP. People are just too tanky. On werewolves you don't have as massive amount of damage as you do on say other classes, because you just don't get the same buff access, and you can't also backbar things like Clever Alchemist, so it's a bit hard to kind of maintain those high weapon damage values. They've also changed a few ways in which kind of debuffs and buffs work as a group in werewolf, so the idea is that if you're in a werewolf you can kind of buff people in your team, you can also debuff people in your team. So I reckon they might change the Call of the Leader pack and basically just make it so that maybe you get bonus stats or regens or critical chance, that stuff, if you're in a werewolf pack, and you get less of it if you're not. Or maybe add some debuffs that if you hit a target then your ally hits the same target in werewolf form, they do bonus damage, stuff like that I reckon. And the next change they're doing to werewolf is looking at the kind of sustain issues that it has, especially in PvE, because you just have to maintain a light attack rotation and it's very boring, and in PvP you have the same issues. So the idea is that if you use Hircine's Bounty, it will now basically give you sustain from it, so it sounds a bit like Dark Deal, so that way if you cast it you get like extra sustain over 10 seconds, or it might become all to you at once. It doesn't say how it works, but so it means you could double cast it and get the heal, go to full health, and then cast it again to get the sustain, which is much more viable now, which you couldn't do in the past. So those are good changes in my opinion. The hope overall though is to make it more entertaining, fun to use, competitive, so that way it's just not a vampire patch, you can use werewolves as well, they're both really good to use, which for me is always a good thing. More options as a PvP player, more fun. Another thing they're kind of just giving us a heads up about is just the item standards, and the idea is that some items were more powerful than others historically, and they've had to obviously nerf things, adjust it because they weren't always standardized. The idea is that if set 1 has 10 power, set 2 has 5 power, which set should be buffed or nerfed? When you obviously got 80, 90 sets in the game with that, like just varying levels of balance and stuff, it doesn't work, so they've tried to get them to have a similar sort of power level. So in this case they're looking at monster sets, and these changes, like the ones they've just outlined below, seem really, really good. So if they do this for like all of them, I'll be like, wow, this is going to be like a really good patch for PvP, fingers crossed. One thing they did say though is that standards aren't written in stone, so just factor that in. But the idea is they want the 2 pieces to kind of make more sense. So if you have a 2 piece that is a damage bit, the 1 piece should link with it, which makes a lot of sense. So the example is that Falcon Scoria in the past used to give you health. Now Falcon Scoria will instead give you spell penetration on the 1 piece. So that way if you use a damage set, your 1 piece should also be a damage related 1 piece. So one of their examples is to make sure that things like Falcon Scoria that has health and also has a sort of damage part to it doesn't exist, because it doesn't make sense. You've got a set that gives you damage but also gives you health, which is a defensive thing. So they're trying to make it so that if you've got a damage bit, you've got a damage bit kind of with that 2 piece. So the idea is that Falcon Scoria, instead of it being health now, it's going to be damage on the 2 piece still, but spell penetration on the 1 piece, which for me is a really good change. Having anything way that way, you can basically get more intuition with a set. So people go, I want a damage set, I run this set, rather than I run Bloodspawn, I get Stamina Sustain, I get Ultimate Generation, and I get Armor. I mean, it does 3 things. So I wouldn't be surprised if that set gets nerfed, in all honesty, or adjusted, because it's a really strong set. Everybody in PvP runs it because it's got like an 80% uptime, ult generation, stamina sustain, which is good on any class. You can see it's a really good set. I do see that being nerfed, sadly, based on these kind of changes already. Another part of changing these sets is to really look at kind of damage values, trigger conditions, and cooldowns. So the idea is that this way there's some form of sort of standardization between them, so that way sets are somewhat comparable. One of the examples is Tremor Scale, which is a really, this sounds really cool now. So basically, when you hit enemies with the effect, they don't get snared anymore, but they have their physical resistance reduced. And for me, having sets like this is a really good thing for small scale, for group play, because you can now synergize with a team. Somebody can actually run Tremor Scale and help every other person in their group, which that's such a good change for PvP, because currently you don't really have many monster sets that can kind of help the whole team, other than Throtherkin, which is, people hate that as it is. So having extra sets like this that kind of has a damage set that also buffs the group's damage is a really healthy thing for the game, in my opinion. They've also done something to help with the performance of some sets, to kind of look at the chance to proc and just get rid of it and say, actually, we're going to have a cooldown. So instead of it being like a 5% chance to proc on dot damage like Falcon Scoria, it's now going to be 5-second cooldown. It procs with a very easy chance to proc, but it procs very easily, but you have to wait 5 seconds before it can proc again, which to me that makes much more sense. There's more counterplay with it. If you get hit with a set like Falcon Scoria, and that's going to hit you every 5-10 seconds, whatever they change it to, or Tremor Scale is going to be every 5-10 seconds, you can react to it and count in your head 1, 2, 3, 4, block, and basically you can react to it. Currently though, some sets have very little ways to react because the cooldown and the proc conditions are like so bizarre and it's not consistent. And some things proc every second, some things proc every 5 seconds, some things proc when you do light attack damage, but it's a 50% chance, and for me this just makes much more sense. And they've also said that Tremor Scale hasn't just had the proc chance kind of adjusted, but they've also increased the cooldown. So the idea is that if the cooldown goes up, so does the damage. So that way, yes, you wait longer for it to go off, but it goes off with much more damage, which that makes much more sense. So the longer you wait for the kind of proc, the more damage you get from it. My concern obviously is, will the damage kind of be sort of loaded at the front? Because you could use these on gank builds then and just have loads of proc sets with just high burst and go bang. Or is it kind of 1 proc, 2 proc, 3 proc, it builds up each time it procs each consecutive proc? Like that's something I need to kind of look into, because my concern is that it could be abused if it gives you the full damage on the first proc. So that's something we need to test out. And then talking about sets and stuff they've kind of wanted to make a bit clearer, make more sense. They're nerfing Black Rose dual wield, like really good change. It's needed, it's absolutely busted. But they're also introducing perfected Maelstrom and perfected Dragon style weapons. So for me, as somebody who likes sort of the Magicka sort of playstyle and that kind of Master Lightning stuff, I mean, a Master Lightning stuff that would be perfected, which would be like, yes, like free stuff. So I imagine it will be very similar to the Asylum or to like the Black Rose, where you'll get the two piece will be very similar, whether it's perfected or non-perfected, but you'll get like an extra bonus bit if it's perfected, where it might be like regen or penetration. So it just a little bit like a nice, here's a little bit extra for you, which for me is always welcome. You know, free stuff, why not? And the big thing though is making them non-perfected and having people have options, which is always a good thing, because currently, like, if you can't get a group to do Dragon Star Arena, you are like locked out of many builds. If you don't get the Master's Lightning stuff, there's many Warden builds that you can't play properly without it. So for me, making sure that you can have ways to get these kind of weapons that are powerful without, you know, being top tier is a really good change, because sometimes you could be a really good player but you might not have the right group to help you get through the content, like Dragon Star Arena. Thus you don't get the Master's Lightning stuff, thus you miss out on all that kind of damage, that playstyle on a Warden for example. So for me, this is a really good change, that it just gives people more options. And it's also true for PvE. Having access to kind of non-perfected Maelstrom weapons means that those people who aren't quite the, you know, top level PvE DPS people, they can still get something that just helps them, because the Maelstrom weapon does give you, you know, a fair bit of DPS for having it. So this is always a good change in my opinion. And the thing that I think is really good is that Black Rose is getting a nerf. Like, it's finally getting a nerf, it needs it. So they're finally changing it so it's more intuitive to the skill that it comes on. The idea is that Blade Cloak is like you shoot daggers around you, which hurts people around you. But the way it currently is that you get 3 major buffs: Major Evasion, Major Expedition and Major Protection. So basically you move really fast, you take less AoE damage, you take less damage at all. So it's like the perfect sort of kiting skill that you just cast it, dirt cheap, you can run away with it, and that's it. Nobody uses it for the damage, nobody uses the skill for what it's meant for. So instead they're going, look, this is a damage skill, it's an AoE damage skill where you're meant to be in the fight. So they're going to change it now that way, instead of giving you major protection for like kiting 1vx with that kind of busted stuff, which I hate the set, hate it. They're now making it so that way that when you cast this, it will do damage around people, and the damage will go up, and your damage will go up against the people that you hit with this, and so will your defense. So the idea that this is that kind of, you should be on them and in their face if you use this set. This set should not be a I run away button, which people currently use it for. So this is a really good change with it. And the last 2 changes, which I'll talk about, kind of critical resistance and healing, and for me these are great changes. In the past, people absolutely crushed on Earthgore when it was kind of at its, you know, it heals every person in the circle, 6 people ran it in a Zerg, the Zerg was unkillable, and then obviously PvE players got really upset, really frustrated when they got nerfed, and look, you've just ruined an Earthgore PvP players, like, shame on you, bad people. And for me, that's not a healthy community. Having PvP and PvE isolated is not good for the game. So what they're doing now, which makes much more sense, they're changing Battle Spirit. Like, it's a simple change. Is there no one else has mentioned it in the past? I've mentioned it in the past. Loads of people, you know, before me who do YouTube stuff, PvP stuff, they've mentioned it in the past. It's never been listened to. It's now being listened to. So let's hope this is something they're going to do going forward, because it's much easier to change. PvE healing is really good currently, so don't mess that up. Just change Battle Spirit in PvP and you're good to go. So what they're doing now is basically saying the healing reduction is not 50%, it's 60%. So you're going to lose 10% healing basically, which for me is a good thing. Healing's through the roof currently. Like, you get Vigor up to like 30k on quite a lot of stand builds quite easily. You can get, you know, your Breath of Life, One of the Dead it is, to, you know, 16, 17k. Twilight goes over 20k. See, these heals are like really high. Higher than they've ever been in the past. When you pair that with high health, high critical resist, people are tanky, you can't kill one another. It just goes on basically, I ride to a keep, fight for 10 minutes, nobody dies, ride to the next keep, repeat. It's really boring, really fast. So that change to healing for me is a really good change. Is it going to go far enough? Probably not. I would really like to see it around 70%, but I'd like them to add like a caveat that if you're in CP, it's even higher, because the heal and receive passives and the blessed passives really kind of make this much more of an issue. If you notice, healing in no CP is not as bad because you just can't amplify it as high as you can with CP. So for me, this It seems more of a CP nerf in all honesty that it should be, not just a blanket nerf to PvP, because it will mess up Battlegrounds quite a lot. The last change, which I think is like absolutely phenomenal, and I've been calling this for probably 2 patches now at least, and I've said this in my Discord, on YouTube, I've said this in no one else's Discord, I've said it to other PvP players like Zidane, and for me it's just, this is a really, really good change. Critical resistance is way too high currently. Basically, Impen is like the trait to go to in PvP. You should not run any other traits because it's not worth it. And Christopher ESO did a video not long ago looking at all of the traits for PvP, so Impen, Divine, Sturdy, and worked out a way to kind of just rank them, and there's a few issues with it, but overall it kind of did the job, and it showed that Impen significantly better than anything else. Like, why would you run Divines, well fitted, Sturdy? There's no benefit to it. And don't even forget about Invigorating, that stuff's just terrible. So they've kind of changed this that way. Other trait options are viable. Does it mean you need to get rid of all your Impen stuff? No. In all honesty, I keep it. Does it mean that you could run well fitted now? Probably. And for me, that's a healthy change. So if you're not aware, what they're doing is basically looking at critical resistance and going, Impen's too high, let's nerf that. But at the same time, we're going to give everybody a flat blanket level of critical resistance. So the idea is that you don't just have to run Impen if you don't want to, because you've got a good amount of critical resist anyway for being in PvP. So you could choose to run Divines, well fitted, Sturdy, if you chose, and you're not going to be at a massive disadvantage to those people who just run straight Impen. So my sort of expectation is that Impen's going to get a hefty nerf, in all honesty, probably 150 critical resist per piece, but they'll probably give you like a flat 1000 critical resistance at all times. So the idea is you get very similar numbers to what we've got now if you go full Impen, but if you don't go full Impen, you're not going to get a massive kind of penalty for dropping 1 or 2 pieces, which for me is a good change. It means you can add in well fitted, you can add in Divines or Sturdy to your build, which is always welcome. So for me, that's just a really good thing. So all in all, there's loads of changes coming to the PTS next week. There's 50 pages worth. That's 50 pages, that's lots of changes. And normally PTS notes are about 37, so you know there's a lot more this time than there are normally. So this is obviously a big change. And what I've read so far, what I've seen so far, looks really, really promising. Will there be things nerfed? Probably. Will there be things adjusted? Yes. Will there be things buffed? Definitely. Will Vampire be good? Obviously. There's going to be loads of cool changes which I'm just really looking forward to test. So what I want to ask you guys right now is, what things do you want to see tested straight away? Like what's your go-to? Like, I really want to see X or Y or Z. Comment, let me know. I would obviously get onto that as quick as I can. I will be making PTS videos all of next week, extensively. I'm going to break them down to very small segments like I do with all of my videos, just to the point. This is what you need to know, this is what it does, off you go kind of thing. So that way there's no waffle, no kind of tangents, and I hope that really helps you. But I'm going to wrap this video up here, guys. It's kind of gone on long enough, but just really, really positive, really exciting changes coming. So I'll catch you in the next one. Thanks for watching, take care, and bye.